Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Industry Night panel. Today, we have events at different levels with three very illustrious guests who I'll let them introduce them first. Let's start with you, Alessandro. Who are you?
Hello, I'm Alessandro Yorio, or better known as Oreo. I'm the current COO of the Canadian Collegiate League. Um, so we run essentially just everything collegiate year round Canadian teams, and I run most of the day to day and more so the Rainbow Six division of it.
Nice. Thank you. And Val?
Yeah, I'm Valerie, or also just known as Silver on social media. I'm currently the marketing events manager at St. Clair College, but I've worked in grassroots, I've founded companies, and I've also worked in a tier two space for a while. I could talk about that forever, but I don't want to take up all the introduction time.
All right. And Benin? Nice. That is very cool. And yeah, actually, fun fact on the Path to Pro panel, we had another Golden State sort of alum, which is kind of a funny coincidence. But I want to start. Yeah. Hey. Nice. Wait, that is very, very cool. Okay. I want to start with like a little general fun question. What, in your guys' opinion, would be a little funny story that you have had from an event? And Dan, I want to say nothing from this past week and a half. Okay. Nothing from this past week and a half. We'll start with you though.
Something funny from an event, just like a general event experience, or
Yeah, just a general event experience, something funny that
okay.
happened.
Okay, I think one of my favorite stories to tell is about Fortnite. So at the peak of the Fortnite era, I ran Fortnite tournaments, and I was kind of the primary tournament organizer in the GTA for Fortnite tournaments. And at the time, absolutely everybody wanted to run a Fortnite tournament, and nobody knew how to do it because there weren't custom games, there wasn't a point system, there wasn't anything like that.
Mhm.
So I ran Fortnite tournaments everywhere. At one point, I ran Fortnite tournaments in a trampoline park. At one point, I ran a Fortnite tournament
Uh,
on a truck. It was at a car show, and they had those trucks with like advertisements on the side, the LED screens.
mhm.
I ran a Fortnite tournament on that. Lots of input buffer. I would not recommend. Um, and my favorite experience was I ran a Fortnite bar mitzvah party. So
Fortnite bar mitzvah.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. They fed me as well. They fed me very well at that event, and they tipped me very well too. And I ran a Fortnite birthday party and or bar mitzvah, and it was awesome. And I joke about it all the time, but like I owe my career to Fortnite, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for me.
Oh, that is funny. Okay. Alessandro, what about you?
Um, well, honestly, this happened probably like 3 or 4 weeks ago, but one of our streams, we were streaming Rainbow Six, and our observer, uh, streaming through YouTube to get a clean feed for Twitch, uh, her YouTube crashed. And so
Oh.
our producer, who had the feed going through, it just auto played onto the next video that was loaded up, um, and had honestly a really, really funny. It was like some magnesium ad video for like helping you poop better,
Oh,
but it was a very interesting 30 seconds. And our casters were trying to talk while listening to it as it was playing on stream while we were trying to audio fix, and it was honestly quite comical.
yeah. Okay. How do you even stay focused as a caster while that is playing in your ears? That's
I have
crazy.
I have no idea, but I'll tell you they did a great job.
Hey, yeah,
Only
you did
only the
professionally.
tiniest little of smirks. So
Okay, if it were me, if I were in that situation, I won't lie, I'll be kind of dying inside. I might break character if I'm being honest.
I was in the background giggling, like I had to mute my mic. It was so bad.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and Dana, what about you? Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Sorry for a second. I believe your mic is muted on the VOD in Jadanen. Go ahead. No worries. No
Goodbye.
worries at all. Goodbye, Dana. there
Two, and it's fixed. There we go. So,
we go.
uh,
Yeah. All right.
talking
Restart the
events.
intro.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want me to give my background again in case it didn't capture?
I believe so. Yeah.
I'll briefly. I'll try to go a bit faster and then jump straight into the event. So, my name's Danon. Background is spent about a year now with the National Association of Collegiate Esports (NACE). I oversee membership and operations, which is primarily recruitment, retention of our members, making sure they're happy, getting the value against the dues that they pay us. Uh, Prior to that, I spent about 15 years at the pro level with groups like Dintos, Complexity. Was on the founding team at Cloud9 for 5 years. Then spent 5 years with the Golden State Warriors, Golden Guardians, Big Dumb Guild, bunch of different gaming and esports adjacent content, influencer marketing work there. With respect to the question around an interesting happening at an event, I'll give a more recent one. I'm going to keep it small and fun in that I helped bring Fragadelphia to Kansas City. It's the first Fragadelphia that wasn't in Philadelphia, the first official mainline Fragadelphia, and uh, rostered a team together for the event of some former pro player friends who were kind of retired, but we wanted to have a little run at it. And we're all excited. Bring everyone, get everyone out to Kansas City. We're driving to the event. It's the day of big match play about to happen, and a player leans into their trunk to pick up their backpack and massively pulls something. And not like one of the funny haha that they're old and they pulled something, like actually tweaked it to the point where they could no longer move for the
Oh
better part of
wow.
a week and a half.
Oh wow.
Um, Now this is a central player to the team. We're now out in the middle of Kansas City of all places, and we have matches starting in a few hours, and these matches run the entirety of the week.
Mhm.
So it's abject chaos. One, helping this player kind of navigate what they're going to do, where they're going to be for the remainder of the event, but also how we're going to field a roster. You can't exactly play Counter Strike playing laying down, and unfortunately, that was what was necessary. We need some bed rest. By some miracle, an awesome kid by the name of Taggy out of Central Kansas happened to be nearby. We knew he played at like a semi-pro level, capable enough. He was amazing, and even though he was in school, dropped everything he was doing, drove immediately straight to our match, probably too fast. And by some miracle, not only showed up, but actually did pretty well. I think we actually managed to be and eliminate a handful of teams before ultimately following in that event. But that was, even 15 years into my pro career, one of the more extreme and chaotic scenarios I encountered. And obviously, the event folks were fantastic about it, making the adjustment, making the stream changes for the player. Everything on the production side was incredibly smooth. If it hadn't been, I probably would have pulled all my hair out.
Okay, yeah, no, that is fair. Wow, that is so unlucky. Just pulling something right as you're gearing up ready for the event, and you just pull something.
Yeah,
That's so unfortunate.
players are not allowed to pick up their backpacks anymore. I'm calling it now illegal.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm completely down for that. Okay, I kind of want to direct the kind of first question towards you, Danon, and now you are completely free to talk about a week and a half ago. But what, in your opinion, as someone who like works for NACE, how does setting up for something like the NACE Grand Finals, the LAN, how does that like? What are the steps that go into that?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's a good question, especially because this is my first real, grand finals national championship moment. with NACE. We'd had some smaller conference championships since I came on, but I came on only about 10 months ago, right after this event took place last year. So I kind of got the entire run of kind of what it looks like and how we build it out and really how that differs. Because again, my background primarily has been professional. And so trying to learn and see and understand how to be scrappy, for example, was super cool. So first and foremost, the biggest outline you have is hardware. Uh, Especially for events like this where there's like a group stage, kind of like almost a qualifier round of matches that you need to work through, which means like a high volume of both athletes as well as technology. You're going to see not only a lot of computers that we need to get, monitors that we need to get, but ultimately flexibility and space, both for desks, for chairs, for viewers, spectators. For the first time ever, we were really trying to intentionally have space for spectators, the room to be able to bring supporters both into the group stage as well as the finals venue. And so, really, it's about setting up and footprinting out what that layout's going to look like and making sure we can be amenable to those ideas, the size and shape of the teams we want to bring. While this was like a new frontier for NACE last year, in that they went from 12 to 48 teams, this year was about doing that but better, right? Doing not only 48 teams, but up to 50 teams with our open qualifying teams and then integrating their parents, their friends, their family, trying to give them somewhere they can engage with the matches. Because transparently, we'd kind of like allowed spectators, but there wasn't an intentional spectator experience. We didn't invite, we didn't promote, and it was not communicated to programs that they could bring those guests along. And so, really trying to be conscious of our hardware expectations, our footprint and space expectations, alongside that fan experience, all totaled up like, months before the event, right?
Mhm.
And then in totality, there's separately the run of show, right? We tried to expand what our broadcast efforts look like around. Normally, we only broadcast those final matches on the main stage, but we knew we had this awesome secondary space for all these qualifying matches. We had all this GSO group stuff we wanted to visit. So we partnered up with awesome programs. I'm going to give the first shout out, obviously, to Val and her team. St. Clair handled both our Valorant and League of Legends GSO group broadcast matches. They were not only our production, but our co streaming partner, which was fantastic. But then additionally, Fanshawe, Ball State, and University of Missouri all also were tapped in. So we were actually handling remote broadcast efforts for the first time ever, broadcasting across 3 separate channels the entirety of 2 full days, kind of 2.5 if you count our finals days. We had some excess matches we broadcast out. All that groundwork was laid out months in advance, right? That was not
Mhm.
something that we discovered or worked out a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. That was work we did with St. Clair Val and their team, weeks and weeks and weeks ago, months ago for the RFPs to go out. All of that procedurally boils out to 4 days total. That's it of broadcast work that, went fantastic and was super awesome. And we're hoping to kind of expand and do more with it next year.
Yeah, I have definitely found from like talking to like not only Val but other people just how long it takes for certain things to like come to fruition. And I know Alessandro, your perspective is a little different as seeing as CCL is majorly online. So kind of
Yep.
what's the preparation to host like not only an online league but so many different streams and for so many different games? What does the preparation for that look like?
It comes down to a lot of just having people aware that they're needed.
Hmm.
Um, so like trying to get casters, production, observers, teams to understand, okay, this is the time frames. We need everybody ready at the start of it. Let's go. And having people scheduled ahead of time. Sometimes it's a little bit easier said than done. There's always people calling out sick last second, games getting moved, and that sort of issue. So little bit like Danon said, little scrappy. You gotta be able to run by the seat of your pants in some cases, but just the idea of preparing with the people that you're working with makes everything easier. It's not months in advance in most cases. It's maybe week to week, sometimes a day to day if plans change, if something happens. But it comes down to a lot of just knowing, okay, this is what I need. I'm going to get people situated, get them at least aware that they're needed. Um, and then delegating to people in some cases too, where, we have a guy who runs our Overwatch who reaches out to our Overwatch casters to set that up. So it's not, you know, I'm not managing 5 different leagues, 5 different streams, all the teams. It's a little bit of split, but still watching over things
Mhm.
more so.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to direct this next question towards you, Val. What, in your opinion, for someone who's worked dabbled in basically a lot of different levels of event organization, what do you think is like the most difficult aspect of organizing an event from start to finish?
Right. It's I would definitely say is learning the skill of delegating. It's funny because Sandra also brought up delegating, and I'm sure Dan also has notes about this too. But it's learning how to delegate. Coming from a grassroots background, oftentimes you wear many hats. You do the marketing, you do the posting, you run the event, you create the bracket, and day of you're herding tournament, tournament attendees around. So from a grassroots background, it's definitely learning the skill of delegating and handing off tasks, and not just handing it off, but handing it off in a way where you set people up for success, you set your event up for success, and creating that team experience. From a grassroots background, I've from the beginning I done a lot of things alone. And my time here at St. Clair, I've learned a lot on how to be an effective leader, and thank God we have some amazing students here, so it makes my job really easy to delegate. But for these larger scale events, that is a common problem I see, even with these like tier 2 tier 1 events, is often delegating and the lack of it, and people taking on too much, they burn themselves out, or things fall through the cracks, and oftentimes these things, they feel small in the moment, but it adds up to the overall event experience. So definitely the hardest part is delegating and learning how to delegate well to your team.
Yeah, no, that is completely fair. And I kind of want to go back to you, Val. And in terms of grassroots, how do you, as an event organizer, try and create long-term value rather than just a one-off thing that's really good?
It really boils down to I guess, like the in the way the customer experience. Dana mentioned this too. It's the spectator experience. It's like the sponsorship experience. I think a lot of organizers overlook that. They're so focused on running the event and the competitor experience. When in reality, these competitors, yeah, they're kind of the main show of the event, but the people that really bring the value to the event are the spectators, the family and friends, the people watching online, and the sponsors, obviously. So I think the main thing is kind of uh, creating that spectator experience, because at the end of the day, esports really is an entertainment industry, and people
Hmm.
don't often view it as that because people are so focused on competing. But it really is just an entertainment industry, and that's something that a lot of event hosts struggle to, I guess, see the perspective on. So creating that value for spectators, and it's something as simple as creating space for spectators. So there's designated viewing areas, there's accommodations for family and friends to watch, and then creating an online viewing experience. I've always said this: if there's no pictures or streams of your event, it might as well have not have happened. Right? Even if it's a
Yeah.
small event with like 10 people, like I would have never known to happen if you don't post about it. So creating that online experience for people, viewing online, watching online, because esports, it has that advantage where there's no barrier of entry in a way. Anybody can participate online. You can participate in Twitch chat. Normal sports, there isn't that personable experience. You can't chat with the sportscasters. You can't see the players posting live results and clips. Esports has that big advantage where you can have direct interactions and connections with these players, with the event, the hosts, the casters, and things like that. So it's building the spectator experience, the attendee experience beyond competitors.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good. Okay. Danon, I want to pick your brain a little bit. As someone who's worked in so many different levels and so many professional levels as well, how do you kind of deal with the change from doing smaller events where not very many people are to really, really big ones where potentially hundreds, if not thousands, could come? And how does that, like, how do you deal with that?
I'm actually gonna ride Val's coattails a little bit on calling out delegation, right? I think the size and scale and the intent of your event changes really how much you want need to delegate, but two, how much you're able to, right?
Hmm.
It's a question of the size of your staff, and then ultimately the size of your resources to be able to expand that staff and work into being able to have like work groups to get things done. Um, Funny enough, what I'll actually call out on top of it, and the thing that really irons in, you have to not only be able to delegate appropriately, or in cases where you can't delegate and you're a smaller, scrappy team, this is even more core, but it's important across the board, and that is relationship management. The biggest thing that you see across all these different tiers of competition, regardless of whether we're talking smaller grassroots, if you're working way up into scholastic, all the way up into club rec collegiate, into varsity collegiate, in person, high level play, ultimately into that tier two, semi pro, amateur, finally into the pro level. Across all of that spectrum, relationship management is key because you can, have a million resources for these large events, or you can have excess resources for small events. You can have these massive supersized teams where you definitely have the capacity to really do anything if you want to put manpower to it. But if you cannot manage your relationships with folks, if you cannot appropriately engage and communicate quickly, efficiently, practically, um, you're going to see all the buildup over the course of, especially as the event drags on. If it's a 1 day event, you might not really see, massive negative outcomes for struggling with your relationship management. But the second you hit day two, the second you're seeing a familiar face more than 1 day in a row, the second you're engaging, and having what are probably going to be some repetitive conversations around like planning, scheduling, and actually executing, setting out rulings and working through the event, mirroring all that against production and making sure you don't have competition outcomes impact production negatively. The second you break into that, it's all relationship management. Being able
Hmm.
to recognize who you have like a working relationship that's positive with, and being able to work together and execute, increases your efficiency. It increases your happiness. Val already called it out as well. Avoiding burnout is going to be not only about delegating to the appropriate people, but making sure you're having a positive experience while doing so, making sure you're happy, making sure that your mental health is protected, because it is a high stress, a high stakes environment to be operating an event where, folks have been so kind to offer you the resources to be able to put an event together, especially in the context of gaming and esports, where, we used to have infinite resources for everything. And now we're working to be a little bit more practical and sustainable. And as you become more practical and sustainable, every dollar matters more. That you're returning that value against that money, and it all boils down to how efficient can you be with your staff? How
Hmm.
practical can you execute the event while not bloating or exploding your expenses, especially in contexts where you can't? And that every single time ties back to, can you keep your people happy?
Mhm.
Can you keep them engaged? Can you keep them fulfilled and motivated to execute on the event? And every single one of those ties back to managing your relationships and handling it appropriately.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, relationships extremely, extremely important. I want to give a question to all three of you, actually. What, in your opinion, are really common mistakes that you see people hosting an event, and what sort of advice would you give to kind of fix those mistakes? I want to start with Alessandra on this one.
Um, Honestly, the biggest thing is people come in a little unprepared for things to go wrong. Um, like there's a quote from one of the Flash TV shows. It's make a plan, execute the plan, expect the plan to go wrong, throw the plan out. Like there's always going to be something happens, a computer breaks, people can't make it on time, whatever the situation. It's having like backup to your backup, and that level of preparation, even with a smaller team, you need to understand what your base is. You have to understand where you're going with it, and you have to know your steps if something goes wrong, so you can, quickly fix. Because a lot of these situations, they don't necessarily take 5 minutes, but say you only have 5 minutes between games, you have to kind of figure out how to hurry it along, how to plug and play and fix things. So
Mhm.
it's really, again, it boils down to preparation and just being able to run with whatever situations pop up and fix them as you go, in my
Yeah.
opinion at least.
Yeah, that reminds me of a Cyclops quote from the X-Men. Actually, he said, "I never have a plan B. I only go to plan two. If I have a plan B, that means the other 27 plans didn't work." And that's low. I see it. I see it's kind of how you want to approach it. Okay, Val. What about you?
Common mistakes when hosting events, aside from some other things we already talked about, like delegation, and a common one is also just leaving a positive impact. I know Dana kind of touched on this in a way, but it costs nothing to have a positive interaction with people. I think a lot of organizers get caught up in the hustle and bustle of events, and I don't blame them. It's usually really busy, but having positive experiences with your attendees, with spectators, with your own team, with your broadcast and production, that's really important. But I want to call out something that I that we haven't talked about yet, and I think a common mistake is documentation. The post-event process. I think people get so hung up on planning the event and executing the event that people oftentimes miss the post-event. So in esports, post-event is really doesn't really quite exist. You know, like post-mortems, something as simple as hosting post-mortems for your event recaps. That's something common, very common in the corporate world, but in esports, teams don't often do that. So hosting post-mortems and having post-event documentation with statistics and having that log somewhere, saving the VODs, tracking all the photos and like the posts that people post about your event. And it's post-event documentation that sets people up for more future events, successful events. And I think that's a very common mistake that a lot of event hosts I see making, whether it's leagues or grassroots events or anything like that. So 100% post-event documentation and tracking.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay. And what about you, Danon?
Yeah, so with respect to the biggest mistake I've seen, and again, I'm gonna put this across the scale of 15 years in the industry, and having started right around when esports was booming, and then worked through where things have contracted a little bit. The biggest thing that I've seen constantly is resource mismanagement. I think there just was never, and still to this day isn't very constantly, a focus on practicality, on sustainability, on consistency and quality, and we've seen that cause constant suffering across the industry, where we see just this ebb and flow. I think we just saw it again recently with like a kind of almost an earth shattering amount of talent changes for CECC recently. There's all these different groups like they're not even a great example because they're still around, but there's so many groups that have come into the space and exited, not because they didn't make a great product and not because they didn't keep people happy, but because they simply didn't manage resources appropriately. They didn't build a sustainable, practical product that could survive the market. And we've all kind of struggled for it. I think, Beyond the Summit's another amazing example of someone who started scrappy and cool, kind of grassroots, and then went for the scale, went for the explosion, the excitement, and unfortunately caused kind of an earthquake effect across their space, where suddenly there's a vacuum because they were really awesome events that attracted a lot of dollars, attracted a lot of eyeballs, attracted a lot of community engagement. And then when they go under, and there's just not a lot this is not a space where there's going to be a constant and easy replacement. So when you're running and operating an event, when you intend on being a group in the space, it's really the onus is on you to stay responsible and stay focused on managing your resources and making sure that not only do you provide a positive experience and build a cool event, but that you can do it again in the future, right? I'll
Mhm.
call out a brand I already called out earlier, which is Fragadelphia, is an amazing group who's been doing this for 20 years now, and they are still just constantly pumping out events. Now they've never been, an IEM or a DreamHack. They've never been a massive, explosive, 5,000 folks churning through a space, but they've put out a solid product consistently, charged appropriately, staffed reasonably, and put themselves in a position to be now the frontrunner for North American specific and focused domestic Counter Strike events. That is more of what we need across the space. And I can call out that like this is a constant mistake we see. And if you go back and look at the last 10, 15 years of esports, this is really the core of what broke so many event organizers in the space.
Mhm.
Sustainability is definitely a problem, even in the
Yep.
tier two space with tier two orgs, not just the event space. Yeah.
Yeah, no, most definitely. It is hard. It's hard trying to find that balance between, okay, how do we make sure we can run again, or do we want to have just the biggest, best event that we could possibly ever think of, you know?
Mhm. Or even how
And
to making doing iterations is huge, right? Resource
mhm,
management isn't exclusively about saving money. It's about getting value, efficiency against the capital you put in. And really, I think that's been the struggle of Folks strike gold on their first event. You know, they probably were pretty scrappy because it was their first event, and they're in a
Hmm.
pretty good position where they could simply maybe run it back, but they shouldn't, right? You should not run the exact same event twice. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's learnings to be had. Obviously, Valkyrie calling out, you know, if you just do a post-mortem, just even a 5-minute conversation is going to yield a better event year over year. But what they end up going for is, well, this was a good event. It's time to hit a grand slam. And they immediately try to smash it out of the park. And that's so cool. And I'm so excited. And I love people's optimism for going bigger, going harder, and doing better. But almost overwhelmingly everyone who takes that swing misses. And what ends up happening is instead of, you know, an event that was probably like, you know, 50% as good as it could be year one, and instead of, you know, hey, year two, 60% as good as it could be, they go, we're going to hit 110%. And
Hmm.
overwhelmingly, one of two things happens. They definitely don't hit 110% of quality, and they definitely absolutely don't hit 110% on cost efficiency. And that ends up crippling their ability. And they might exist for another year, but it's going to be a 30% event the year after. And because of the damage they've done to the brand, the damage they've done to their community, you end up with a, you know, a 0%. There's no event, you know, 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah.
I would like to add on a point, because I run the Canadian collegiate scene. We originally started just as Rainbow Six, then we did Valorant, and then we added Rocket League, CS:GO, and Overwatch. And I can fully agree with Dane in there. You gotta figure out where you're going with that first and settle in properly, because we definitely expanded a little bit too quickly. The first season doing 5 games was a lot scrappier than our year one kind of situation. And anything to learn from that, I would say take your time, figure it out, because trying to expand and get too big too quickly will hurt you more in the long run. Granted, we've managed to survive, and we are already planning our next year's, adding another game, even potentially in Marvel Rivals. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but being careful on situations like that where you don't put too many eggs in the basket, and don't try to become something bigger than what you should be, is a huge thing. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, it's kind of segueing into the next question, but on account of like just growing too fast, what, in your opinion, Alessandro, is something that was really, really, really bad that happened to you that was on account of you guys maybe putting on like taking up more than you could chew, and how did you and your team overcome and solve it?
So a lot of it came down to our production value of it. Um, like like Valerie said earlier, like, your main goal is to produce and get videos out. Um, and for our first season of Valorant, we were basically streaming maybe every other week, so it wasn't quite consistent. It wasn't quite out there, and our production on that was lacking a fair amount.
Hmm.
So we just didn't have the resources and the manpower to feasibly do the 5 games week in, week out. Um, and so that definitely hurt. We managed to figure it out just because we had every single person involved reaching out, seeing, oh, can you find a producer? Do you know anybody who might cast? Do you know observers? And that was a huge, huge step up when we started to get a little bit of that like spider webbing out, um, and attracting more people to come in and do some work. Because most of it was volunteer at the start. Now we do offer some payments for people's hours that they put in, but it's really, like Danon said, if you're gonna have the budget, you have to utilize it properly, and having the manpower so you're not just scrappy, 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 but organized and efficient with everything. Every piece of resource that you have is really the huge part of it.
Hmm. Okay, and I had another general question for all of you. How do you approach inclusivity and accessibility at different event levels? I wanted to start with Danon on this one.
Yeah, this one's especially challenging for NACE. We're a little weird because we are, you know, positioned to almost like a governing body, kind of like the NCAA, or like the NAIA, and we champion varsity standards, and we try to define those through our leadership groups. And generally, that outlines to having like a full time staff member responsible for the program, having like a designated facility that you play your matches out of, and then having like a campus official overseeing those matches. And then additionally, we have the tack on requirements, of course, of being a full time student and passing your classes, being in good academic standing. Every single layer of all of those restrictions I just outlined are core to our mission, right? That's like what we've been championing. That's what we've been empowered by our membership exclusively to focus on.
Mm,
What's challenging is that those requirements are also not, you know, guaranteed. They're not guaranteed accessible at all times. There are a lot of different layers of accessibility that we need to work through. I'm so lucky that we have a group called the Eligibility Enforcement Committee, whose entire space is supporting my staff and my home office to review and understand, where these challenges are and helping better fix and accommodate. So, for example, remote play. We require you to play in person. You have to be in your facility on campus. You need to have a campus official, over your shoulder, spectating your match, making sure you're not cheating, making sure you're not ringing. But at the same time, we recognize there are folks in the space who have really unique challenges where esports is accessible to them in the way traditional athletics isn't. They can't play football, they can't play baseball, but they can play a video game at a computer. But they're maybe not fit to travel, right? It could be something as basic as agoraphobia, especially autoimmune issues are like a really big concern that are interesting and unique, right? If you have an autoimmune disease, you pretty much just can't play a sport. That's just patently true. You can't be around others, you can't be engaging depending on how severe it is. Esports, you could, in theory, like nothing stops you, especially for a lot of the other groups in the space to play fully remote. We don't initially allow that. You actually have to have and go work through a process for an exemption approved by our EEC to work through that, right? So, really, for us, it's about process. It's about having a system for when and if we're operating both online and in person events that we can field and hear those concerns and process them through what membership wants us to do, right? I don't think
mm,
membership wants us necessarily to get in the way of this, but they do want us to uphold and maintain our integrity for competition. And unfortunately, with the nature of competitive sports, it is in the nature of everyone's interest to try to be as competitive as they can and looking for advantages where they can. And we have to be able to discern between someone who's just simply seeking a competitive advantage and who needs an appropriate, real accessibility accommodation for their competition efforts.
mhm. Okay. And Val, what about you? How do you at the grassroots level approach inclusivity and accessibility?
I'm gonna tackle this from a different perspective, from like marginalized gender and women inclusivity perspective. Uh, so I'm a firm believer in the trickle down effect. So what that means is seeing marginalized genders, seeing like marginalized races in the top level management means you're gonna see more people at the lower level, at the spectator level, at the attendee level. So this is like shown. I've had I've had this experience like um, at Toronto Valorant when we ran in 2022. Oh my gosh, it's been a while now. In 2022, we had a 40% female and marginalized gender attendee rate, which is honestly incredible for a male-dominant industry that is esports. And that is 100% due to the fact that on our team, our leaders in esports were like women and marginalized genders, and we transparently showed that. Right. As a woman myself, like when I first attended my event, it was probably like 99% uh, men at the event. It was a League of Legends tournament. And over time, I attended more events because I was able to see more women and more marginalized genders at events. And that's how it should be. And I think, I guess my bottom line of that is transparency and showcasing like these marginalized genders and inclusiveness in leadership. And it's obviously still a factor that's improving in esports, but it's improved a lot in the last few years with game changers. Riot Games specifically, they've started game changers initiatives, and across a lot of other dev leagues they've started that as well. Even in R6 I've seen women and marginalized gender initiatives, and it's not being afraid to showcase these initiatives and show it to the world, and posting about it on social media. And if you are, someone involved with the marginalized genders, like you should be showcasing that as well. And it's the more people see it, the more people want to join. Right? It's the trickle down effect.
Mhm. All right. And Alessandro, someone who massively lives online, how do you approach inclusivity and accessibility?
Um, I mean, in my opinion, the big part about that is on a wider scope. For a lot of our schools, they don't have, facilities, they don't have officials. It's a lot more less it's less varsity, more club run in a lot of cases. Of course, there's the exceptions of you have your St. Clair Saints and Conestoga, but it's getting it's letting teams who are smaller form coalitions so that they get a chance to play because it gives them a chance to be involved in the scene, get to stick around, and maybe in the future they reach out to more people on their college campus and build a team and just find people to play with, because at the end of the day, more of what we preach is fun with friends. It's a family friendly zone. Yes, it's esports. It is competitive. There's always going to be a little bit of competitiveness, and everything that comes with that. But we want teams to feel included. We want people to feel safe. And we have, regulations and everything out the wazoo to protect players from situations that might come up. Uh, but it comes, in my opinion at least, it comes down to finding a way to help everybody get the chance to be involved and play. um, like my favorite thing to say whenever we have to find a unique situation and figure out, oh, can they form this team, this person's only part-time, generally we require full-time status. Oh, they have extenuating circumstances, okay, it makes sense. I always say we let the kids play, because at the end of the day, we're here to build leagues for them, to build opportunities for them to play, to find friends, to make those connections. And at the end of the day, for me, inclusivity is give them the route that they can, and don't sit there and say, oh, you don't have an esports facility. Oh, you don't have a full team. Tough. No, it's find a way to get them involved, get them playing. That's really, for me, the big part of it.
Hmm. Yeah, very, very powerful perspective, I do want to say. I have another question for all three of you, and it's kind of picking your brain, but what trends, in your opinion, are shaping the future of esports events right now? Start with Val.
Oh wow. What trends are shaping? Sorry, can you repeat it?
What trends are shaping the future of esports events?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is content creation and content creators. I think the esports space has evolved so much. Not only the esports space, just the online space. Influencers, like there's full-time influencers. There's so many creators, full-time creators. Like when we work with a lot of kids here at like summer camps and stuff. When we ask them what they want to be, they want to become a YouTube creator. Like that's a career option now. So I would say content creators are definitely kind of the new trend and growing trend in the esports, online, and entertainment space. And utilizing content creators at events is definitely a trend that should be, explored more. Whether that's bringing content creators to your event to do a specific activation or campaign, or just showcasing content creators, whatever it is, or even content creator ran events, like Ludwig runs tournaments, like there's Tyler One tournaments, there's Jinxie tournaments, like these are the events that get a lot of traction and attention, and it's utilizing these content creators in the space, and exploring that concept in esports.
Okay, okay. And Danon?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest trend that I'm so excited we're seeing now, I've been waiting literally my entire career for this, is monetization. So obviously you heard my background. You've heard my
That's a crazy
background.
idea.
I know, right? Yeah, yeah. You heard my background. Lots of esports and gaming stuff. But I grew up also, by some miracle, super into traditional sports. I'm actually named after a college football athlete who then went on to play like AAA MLB baseball, who then went on to play in the NFL for my favorite team. That's who I'm named after. And so my familiarity and background growing up was a lot of ESPN. It was like every pro and collegiate sport you've ever heard of. And all through elementary, middle, and high school, I was highly engaged in sports on top of video games. And ultimately, I just got very lucky that esports manifested around the same time that I was growing up. But that audience is so aware and accustomed to the necessity that is monetization, right? Making money off of the initiatives so that you can turn around, invest more into those initiatives, and expand and grow your presence. The esports audience, unfortunately, did not more often than not grow up like I did. And so they are less aware. They're less familiar. They happen to grow up on the back of technology exploding, the information age, the internet being free, and then finally, and ultimately, Twitch. Right, that's where esports started and has been kind of continuing to expand and grow. That's where it really has metastasized as an industry is Twitch. And the unfortunate side effect of that is that really Twitch didn't over leverage themselves, especially early on monetizing. And so the average esports fan isn't super familiar with the idea of ads. I think we just saw another explosion about commercialization of esports with the LCS this week, talking about the
The
like
Uber
Uber
Eats
Eats,
teleport.
Uber Eats
Yeah.
teleport,
Yeah.
and kind of the industry kind of having an earthquake just around one simple tweet, criticizing the commercialization of the product. But really, transparently, we want to see growth. We want to see the LCS. We want to see VCT. We want to see these Counter Strike events. We want to see all these different spaces grow to be the NFL, the NBA. If you're not an American sports fan, you want to see everything become Premier League over time. That's the goal. And I think we're finally seeing that trend take place where anyone who operates in the space is finally recognizing the need to monetize. I think there was kind of, the early years, the soft anticipation of, sponsorships are going to carry a lot of the teams. But transparently, that's not how traditional athletics works. Traditional athletics at the pro level, collegiate level is not guided by sponsorship marketing, especially at the team level directly. It is not logos on a jersey. It is not rotators on a Twitch stream. That is not what funds teams and what funds events. That's not what funds the NFL and the MLB, the NBA, NHL across the board. There are so many different avenues that you have to be able to execute on to build a sustainable, practical business in sports. Esports is not going to be any different. And so I'm really excited to see that trend starting to take off. And it should become hopefully more consistent, more stable. The quality of that commercialization hopefully continues to increase, and we can start building a real future for esports as a business.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very, very good. And lastly, Alessandro, what trends are you seeing that you're thinking is kind of shaping the future of esports events?
Um, the trend I'm seeing the most actually is mimicking more traditional sports like hockey, basketball, soccer. Like you have the PWHL in hockey, the WNBA, the Women's Premier League. It's building leagues for women, for marginalized groups to feel safe, to be included, where they're not, constantly being talked down to. They're told they're not competitive, but it's giving them openings, right? It's again going back to what I said before, let the kids play kind of situation. It's building out spaces for people to play, feel safe, include them in the community, get them involved because it once you have a foundation like that, you can just continue and build and build. Um, and so the trend, like I said, it's really just mimicking the big world trends of inclusivity and encouragement for people who might not have, picked up a controller or started playing PC games 10, 15 years ago because
Mhm.
they were a woman. Now it's, more so normalized. It's not seen solely as a man's or men's game. It's more split, more included, more societally driven to feel safe for everybody.
Yeah. Well, that is good and extremely important, like Valerie and you were talking about. Yeah. Now, kind of as a final question for all of you, and just a little look back, if you will. What's a moment during an event that you ran where you thought to yourself, "This is exactly why I do this. This is why I do my job, and this is why I love it." I'll let you guys think on that for a second, but we are going to start with you, Danon.
I mean, I'll do the lowest conceivable hanging fruit because I've had some pretty awesome moments in my career. I probably have the medal actually just behind me, and I'll grab that shortly. But The moment that was obviously the most fulfilling for me is going to be, if anyone's familiar with the Boston Major in Counter Strike. Um, that was a culmination of years of effort by Cloud9, kind of entering a newer space that a lot of other groups were more familiar with, especially with Cloud9 being more startup at the time, and the explosion of not only Counter Strike but esports as a whole, a massive amount of investment across the space, and one of the coolest parts of it that a lot of people probably are like less focused on, but I was hyper focused on, was that like traditional business and sports lean. Really, what that event was hosted by E-League, which actually was owned by Turner Broadcasting out of Atlanta. That's TNT, that's TBS. Um, so really, that moment was that like ESPN engaging esports moment for me. But getting to be part of what is like still recognized as one of the most impactful esports moments is always going to live on. The sheer joy not only of the players, of course, my kids, but their parents, their family showed up. Like everyone was present for that moment, and then finally the fans, right? A shockwave of esports excitement across not only the arena in Boston, but the greater esports ecosystem. There are people who have never heard of Counter Strike, who have only heard of some super niche esports title you've never heard of and never participated in, who are intricately aware of that event and the impact it had on the industry over time. And I'll never forget not only the joy that I got to both experience and see across everybody, but the pain of my leg because as I jumped on stage, I slammed it against a piece of metal, and I was
Oh.
bleeding profusely, and I had no idea, had no clue. I'm just walking across the stage,
Yeah.
bleeding everywhere. Apparently, it wasn't until probably 15-20 minutes later I looked down and there's just a nice red streak. I'm not sure anyone did. We were all so distracted. The production, the crew, the fans, the families, the players, everybody was so distracted that none of us noticed me bleeding all over the stage.
Nice, nice. Okay, Alessandra, you?
For me, it was one of the more big moments, at least for CCL. So Rainbow Six has majors everywhere, and they originally had one in Montreal, about a year and a half back. Uh, and again, CCL originally was primarily a Rainbow Six league, but the event was hosted in Montreal. Few teams came down, and we managed to get, I think, 20 or 25 players together for a picture, um, to all celebrate being together. And it was kind of that moment that was like, okay, we're not huge, we're not massive, but we're collecting all these people, we're able to get them all together to celebrate and enjoy something together and have fun. Um, and so for me, that moment was really quite special. Just getting everybody together for a picture, having some random passerby take a picture. Uh, it was special. It was like the small beginnings of the community, and now we have you know almost 20 some odd teams. So it was a small moment that has led somewhere bigger, and for me, that really encapsulates everything that I want out of being part of CCL is having friends, having the community, and the collective enjoyment of our esports.
Hmm. Yeah, that I like that. I like that. And Val?
I love both of those. I've I've kind of been in the space for about 10 years now. I've run so many events, worked on so many shows. But my most impactful moment was something like smaller, way back when I was in my esports club. And at the time, there was no funding. Uh, I'm pretty sure we even had to get signatures from different profs to even legitimize our club. And I ran my very first event on my own. It was a League of Legends tournament. At the time, we had no gaming PCs. I had to download League of Legends on a USB stick on our like school computers manually. Otherwise, it wouldn't let you download it. Um, and the event, for lack of better words, was a mess. Like it was my first time running it. I had over 100 signups. People showed up, and I didn't know where to put them. We didn't have space. The bracket was a mess. It was my first time using like challenge or battlefield. I don't remember what it was. Um, and people were asking questions. The PCs sucked. People couldn't even plug in their mice because at the time, like the school computers, like they had all their peripherals locked in, so people couldn't steal anything. Um, and it was an absolute disaster. But the most impactful moment was after the event. I actually had, so many attendees come up to me and say, "Hey, thank you for putting on this event. Like when's the next one? And that's when, I realized like the event experience is completely different from your perspective and the attendees' perspective. We put on these events and we're so hung up on perfecting it and putting on a great show. We forget that the attendees experience it completely different, right? It all started, like esports all started as a space where, you know, it was an online space and people didn't have a way to meet their friends. You have your friend from the USA or whatever, and you never met them in person. And it's these collective spaces where you have the opportunity to meet them and hang out with them and play with them. And it's creating these communities. We all started in this space as grassroots. Most of the people, most of the trailblazers at the beginning just did it all out of passion. Um, so I think we forget often the attendee experience and how oftentimes people are just happy to have a community that they can collectively hang out at and meet their friends at and experience esports together. So my impacts, my highlight moment was definitely just the first awful event I ran and still having attendees come up to me and tell me that they had a great time.
Nice, nice. I do like that, and yeah, at end of the day, most importantly is the attendees and what you got to look out for. But it's going to be the end of the day for us. Thank you all so much for this amazing panel. I really enjoyed talking to all of you and kind of getting different perspectives on very many different levels of events. But before we close, we got to thank our sponsors. Thank you so much to BMO. To help you focus on what's important, BMO has checking and savings accounts, credit cards, and borrowing options specifically designed for students. Open a BMO student account and get up to $950 in value, including $175 cash with BMO student offers. Visit bmo.com/students for details. And BMO Next Level is a first of its kind program dedicated to helping gamers level up in game and in real life. Run by Sean Frame, BMO's gaming relations specialist, Sean brings a commitment to helping viewers achieve their financial goals and a passion for gaming as an active member of the gaming community. Type !BMO or !BMO NXTLVL for more details. And One of Zero. One of Zero has supplied CIA with 6 gaming mice that make you better at what you do. Type !raffle in this main channel chat for a chance to win one of 6 gaming mice supplied by One of Zero. Code like a maniac, design like a guru, and game like an assassin. Take pride in your setup and look good while you achieve it all. Discover your inspiration, defy definition, be One of Zero. To learn more, type !1OF0 in chat. That's !1OF0. But thank you all so very much for watching, and don't go anywhere. Soon we will have League of Legends top 8 at 4 p.m. PST or 7 p.m. EST. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.